Assalamu alaikum. This is Hena Zuberi, and you're watching Muslim Network News. Our first story today is a follow up to George Floyd's murder trial. George Floyd's cause of death was determined to be from heart attack due to asphyxiation. Dr. Bradford Van Kende Langenfield confirmed this in his testimony during the seventh day of Derek Chauvin's death. Chauvin, the former Minneapolis police officer, was charged with killing Floyd last year. Langenfield attended to Floyd when he was brought to the Hennepin County Medical Center on May 25th. He said he tried to revive him for 30 minutes before pronouncing George Floyd dead at 9:26 p.m. that day. Langenfield also said that he ruled out overdose as the likely cause of death since the paramedics who brought Floyd to the hospital did not give any indication that he had overdosed. This directly contradicted Chauvin's defense claim that Floyd died due to drug use. Langenfield also said that the delay in giving Floyd CPR due to the arrest likely significantly reduced his chances of being revived. United States Senate parliamentarian Elizabeth McDonough has ruled that President Joe Biden's $2.25 trillion budget package can pass with a simple majority vote, avoiding a GOP filibuster. The move is a major win for Democratic Senate Majority Leader Charles Schumer. It will allow him to pass Biden's package by reviving the fiscal 2021 budget resolution. The filibuster has traditionally been used in the U.S. Senate to block or delay action on a bill or other measure. Republicans have criticized Biden's package from the start, saying it offers far too much spending on infrastructure. The GOP also negatively compared the package's climate measures to the Green New Deal. Black gun ownership is up by 58% since last year. 5 million Americans bought their first gun between March and August in 2020, and black gun ownership was the highest rise amongst any demographic, according to the National Shooting Sports Foundation. The Guardian newspaper reported many reasons for new black gun ownership. This included pandemic-related stress, seeing armed white protesters in the media, and experiencing racism. Most gun stores and shooting ranges in the United States are owned and operated by white Americans, who Black Americans say treat them with apathy or condescension. In response, Black Americans have formed their own gun clubs and associations like the National African American Gun Association. The organization was formed in 2015 to encourage Black gun ownership and to educate members on proper gun use and safety. Black-owned gun stores are springing up from Colorado to Virginia. According to the Gallup organization, Republicans, rural residents, men, self-identified conservatives, and Southerners are most likely to say they personally own a gun. Liberals, Democrats, non-white Americans, women, and East Coast residents are the least likely to report personal gun ownership. One 2020 survey found that around 42% of households in the United States reported owning one or two guns. This makes the U.S. the most heavily armed civilian population in the world. U.S. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar is under attack again, this time by Republican Congressman Greg Murphy of North Carolina. Murphy invoked the 9/11 attacks in response to Ilhan Omar's expression of grief about an attack on Capitol Hill last Friday that killed a policeman. A suspect rammed him and another officer with his car. Wielding a knife, Noah Green was shot dead as he got out of the car. The other officer hit by the car survived. Congresswoman Omar had said that the outcome may have been worse if the attacker had used an AR-15 instead of a knife. Murphy retorted that it would have been worse if they had been flying planes also, an obvious reference to the 9/11 attack on New York. Murphy was widely rebuked, including by North Carolina Democratic Senator Jeff Jackson. The Council of American Islamic Relations, Director of Government Affairs, Robert McCow, responded to Murphy's tweet saying it was disrespectful to the victims of 9/11, to their families, and to the countless Muslims and other minority hate crime victims who were targeted in the wake of 9/11. McCow said Murphy's bigoted comments only served to perpetuate the climate of hate that we are witnessing nationwide. Now on to Russia. Russian President Vladimir Putin has extended his hold on power. Putin has signed into law a measure that will allow him to seek additional presidential terms in 2024 and 2030. The restriction of term limits was removed by constitutional changes approved by voters last year. The change means that Putin could remain in power until 2036. That is, until he is 83 years old. To learn more about this story, let's watch this report by Ali Khalaf and Saleha Farouk.
Russian President Vladimir Putin, as a former KGB officer, is using all the old Soviet tricks in the book. While his opposition leader is in jail, Putin ensured a constitutional amendment would allow him to stay in power. He is serving his fourth consecutive term as president and was re-elected for a 6-year term ending in 2024. The 68-year-old Russian leader will potentially remain in power until the age of 83. Under his leadership, Putin has been accused by the United States of interfering in the US elections and poisoning opposition leaders.
Pig feet, bacon, and slashed tires were used to vandalize a Muslim security guard's car in San Rafael, California. Reshmika, who did not disclose her last name, linked this incident over 3 weeks ago to her reporting misconduct by her supervisor in February. The driver's side window was also shattered, and the finish of the car was ruined by paint thinner and glue. Rashmika said she's always parks her car in the same spot when she's on night duty. Pig feet and bacon are pig products and are strictly avoided by Muslims around the world. Rashmika has since been suspended from her job as Securitas Security, saying that she violated company confidentiality by talking about the now closed internal investigation of the incident. However, the San Rafael police investigation is ongoing. Now on to Dallas, Texas, where we're going to be reporting an extremely sad and triggering story. Tragedy struck a Bangladeshi Muslim family in Ellen, Texas, where 3 generations of the family were killed in an apparent suicide pact by brothers Farhan and Farbeen Tawheed yesterday. Police confirmed the identities of other victims, which included their grandmother, Altufan Nisa, their parents, Iran and Tawheedul Islam, and their older brother, Tanveer. Farhan Tawheed shared his plan in a note on Instagram. He detailed his and his brother's struggles with clinical depression and said they agreed that they could not fix their struggles within a year, that they would kill their family and themselves. The news has shaken up the Bangladeshi community. Sean Ahsan, who knew the family, reported to local news that although the close-knit community kept tabs on each other through regular visits, they did not know that there was so much unhappiness in the Tawheed household. Police say there were no prior contacts with the family that would indicate that there were problems. They are asking for help from anyone who can provide more information. After the break, we'll be talking about this unfortunate incident and how to cope with mental health issues. A mental health expert, Abida Minhas, is going to join us from Ellen, Texas, for an in-depth analysis.
We are Justice for All. Headquartered in the heart of downtown Chicago, Justice for All is a global humanitarian initiative dedicated to raising awareness for human rights concerns impacting vulnerable minority groups. Our diverse team of staff and volunteers, led by Imam Malik Mujahid, work tirelessly to help Justice for All achieve their goals. We promote policies that protect religious freedom, address the root causes of mass displacement, and recognize the plight of refugees and forced migrants. Together, we can continue to stand up for justice. Justice for all.
Right now, the COVID-19 vaccines are available to millions of Americans, and soon they will be available to everyone.
This vaccine means hope. It will protect you and those you love from this dangerous and deadly disease.
I want to go back to work and I want to be able to move around.
To visit with Michelle's mom, to hug her and see her on her birthday.
You know what I'm really looking forward to is going to opening day in Texas Ranger Stadium with a full stadium.
We've lost enough people and we've suffered enough damage.
In order to get rid of this pandemic, it's important for our fellow citizens to get vaccinated.
I'm getting vaccinated because we want this pandemic to end as soon as possible.
So we urge you to get vaccinated when it's available to you.
So roll up your sleeve and do your part.
This is our shot.
Now it's up to you.
They took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
A free 3-minute online chat can give you the personalized tips you need to start boosting your retirement savings today.
Welcome back. With us, we have in the studio from Dallas, Abida Minhas, who's a mental health expert. Thank you so much for joining us, Abida.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for having me on, sister.
Alaikum assalam. This is, first of all, condolences to your community. I'm sure you're all reeling. What has the reaction been like from the community?
Thank you for asking that question, sister. I think for all of us, we're in a state of shock and probably grief. But I think we're in less than 24 hours. I think we're still processing, to be honest. I think we're all mentally just trying to figure out exactly how to align the pieces together.
I wanted to ask you, in general, ISBU research has found that American Muslims are reluctant to seek mental health care for a variety of reasons and have stigmatized beliefs about both mental health as well as those who work in the field. So what have you experienced generally? Have things been changing? Are more people reaching out for help?
That's a great question, sister. For all of us in this community, I've been a therapist for about 11 years. And I can tell you from where I started my journey professionally to where I am now, I see far more therapy clients that are from our community, Muslim mental health community members that belong to the Muslim community. So in the last, I would say at least 5 years, I see a trend where people are reaching out for Muslim therapists, speaking to professionals in the community. But from where I started my journey 11 years ago, I think maybe less than the population was probably Muslims. And now I'm probably seeing 50% of my caseload is Muslim therapy clients. So there is a better chance that people are seeking out health, but we're not there yet.
So a study of American Muslims between the ages of 18 and 25 found that many members of this particular group feel that their parents' generation are completely out of touch with cultural and social influences, and this is added to their mental health, the status of their mental health. And interestingly, many of these people whose parents would not be immigrants, they might be second, third generation. So I wanted to ask you if what are you seeing? Because some of these, what cultural and social influences what is the generation gap right now?
So we see, Sister Hena, what we see generally is there is more reluctancy on the part of the immigrant parents to seek out mental health. A lot of times what we hear is a lot of cultural biases that they come from, that, seeing a therapist or seeking out help for psychiatric issues means that you're essentially labeled as psychotic or crazy, or there's title, that you might be somebody who needs actually really very severe help. But the first generation or the children of these immigrant family members are more likely to reach for help. I would say there's probably a trend where maybe 75% are more likely to seek out help versus their immigrant families of origins. And there is not any kind of, statistic or data why that is, other than I think the mental health itself, socially and communally, has been labeled as a stigmatized relationship. So seeking out mental health or seeking out issues that we all need help with at times is essentially labeled as stigmatized.
And so, coming back to this case, someone sent me the suicide letter of this one of the young men, and just that in itself is a tragedy that it's being so widely spread on WhatsApp groups. How is this going to impact the larger community, children themselves? It talks about cutting very seriously, and this is something that we're definitely seeing an increase in our communities. What advice would you give to parents whose children might read this letter?
As a professional, I can tell you on a personal and professional note, being a parent myself, it scares me actually. I'll say that for sure on a personal level. And I mean, one, I belong to this community in Allen. Two, I'm a mental health provider in this community in Allen. And three, I'm a parent myself. So I think a lot of times it hits a lot closer to home for those factors. The other thing I think is we worry as professionals, and as a professional, what I worry about is that the long-term damage it can cause for people essentially copying some of this behavior. But more than that, the effect that it leaves, the trauma that it leaves behind for the community members that are healing from this issue or thinking about this, processing it, looking into that letter. My advice is going to be to have a very candid, depending on the age of your child, conversation with your child, to speak with them on things that could impact their own mental health, to be able to talk about what do we do if there's a warning sign for your child. Impactful dialogues in our communities are often not as open as they should be. A lot of times we come from a community where there's a lot more lecturing and talking down to because of the hierarchy in our communities. And so I think it's better to talk to your child, again, depending on their age group, again, depending on where they are in the spectrum of development, and to be able to talk to them about what and how this is impacting them and what as a family you can do. If you think that there's a profound effect on your child, as a parent, I advise you to seek out supportive care, like their pediatrician, a supportive doctor, a therapist, a mental health provider in your community, as well as somebody you trust, like a family member that you could trust very deeply.
One specific point in this case, and generally in the Muslim community, depression and anxiety are two very common mental health issues, and the pandemic isn't helping. So one part of my question is, how do we define depression in a way that it's not just, oh, I'm sad, or but really clinical depression? How can we explain to people that what depression is as a disease? And then my second part of my question is, with the pandemic, if you could share some coping skills for our community, for families, that would be really, really helpful.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, first of all, Hena, for asking such a great question. And I think thank you, of course, for making this an open dialogue. But one thing I would say, yes, profoundly in the pandemic, one of the major things that we're seeing that is on a rise is mental health issues. It's an epidemic because we're seeing people not doing the normal things that they were enjoying in life. We're seeing families that are going through losses and grief. We're seeing information inundated to us, so people are scared and worried for themselves and their loved ones. So naturally, that causes a lot of anxiety. And of course, when we're recluse, the way that we've been socially, oftentimes you see more of an increase in depression. So as you asked, what are some warning signs? A lot of times for especially depression, the warning signs that I look for clinically are things that the person is changing behaviors very quickly. They're not eating or sleeping as well. A lot of times they may be talking about harming themselves or somebody else. They may often talk about how life is not giving them the kind of joy that they once had. So a term that we call anhedonia. So often they lose interest in the things that they found fulfillment in before. So that is one of the big warning clinical signs for depression. And often we see that pattern within a 2+ span. So if somebody's going through, let's say, a bad day for a few days, that is not as clinically relevant if you see them going through that same pattern of behaviors for 2 weeks plus. And then you see that change in them for where this was not the person you remember a few months back. So that's one warning signs of depression. In terms of coping skills, Sister Hena, I think one thing I would definitely say is oftentimes we have to be able to give each other communal support. Unfortunately, we don't have that right now with the pandemic. So, self-care is very important. Making sure that you're taking out at least 10, 15 minutes, whether it's doing your spiritual prayers, your du'as, whether it's taking some time out to do a walk. I read a study research recently that even said you can even have a pretend commute that you do to your work, do a pretend walk in terms of like the commute that you weren't doing before. So to maintain some kind of regular maintenance of your normalcy that you had before. So, those are some coping skills. And of course, trying to talk and speak to somebody who gives you a lot of positivity, like a good friend or family member or a professional, even if you need to be able to find that. And, for myself, I collaborated and created a network here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area called MAPS, which is Muslim Psychological Association. And so for Muslim, for people in the community, that Muslim Association for Psychological Services, we want to be able to provide that tool, that maintenance for the community that is suffering right now for us. So inshallah, that's our hope at least. And we continue to do that psychoeducation as well as coping skills and building bridges with our communities.
Well, thank you for that, and thank you for your work. One last point before we end this, and this is very, people who have depression don't usually murder their entire family. I would like you to talk to this point because, again, this is a very stigmatized disease, and to stigmatize it even further because of this case would be a travesty to our community.
Yes, I think that's a very good point, Sister Hena. I'm so glad that you mentioned that. I can tell you that mental health doesn't often lead to violence. People, it is a very, very small percentage of people that often do violent acts if they have a mental illness. Unfortunately, going through this process in the last 24 hours, I don't want to speculate or make any kind of clinical diagnosis on anything to deal with the family. And, I wish their loved ones a lot of strength and a lot of healing through this process, for sure. I have a lot of empathy for them and our community, and a lot of grace to be able to heal. But certainly, depression doesn't mean violence. Mental health does not equal to violence. What we do need often is to help prevent somebody who's declining in a hopeless situation to be able to have supportive community bridges so they don't end up in hopeless situations. Unfortunately, the human mind is very conditional. So when you have conditional issues like hopelessness, when nothing seems to make sense, even though it may be a temporary situation, if somebody's stuck in that hopelessness for too long, unfortunately, they do commit acts of violence. Mm-hmm. And that's what we want to prevent, that bridge, that lapse from turning into a mental health that can be prevented and create healthy and happy outcomes versus it leading into a path of destruction or someone spiraling so out of control that they lose hope and grip in life.
That is such an excellent point, and thank you for making that connection, that bridge between being in a place where you are suffering from a disease to a point where you bridge over and providing the resources right then and there. And as many of our WhatsApp groups, our Facebook groups have been on full-on chatter mode throughout the community, one thing that is being discussed, which I am very, very happy to hear, is that mental health in masajid spaces, getting our imams trained, all of this is resurfacing. And this conversation needs to continue in communities across the
country. Inshallah. And that's my hope too, Sister Hena. I mean, certainly my hope is that, inshallah, we can make collective bridges to be able to include our imams, our community leaders, our mental health professionals like myself, to be able to create a village for people that may be suffering with mental illness. And, my hope is, and inshallah, I truly believe that if we're collectively helping community members that are going through tumultuous issues, that we can certainly be very successful, and we destigmatize things like mental health and mental illnesses and help be supportive for those who need it.
Thank you so much for being here, Abda Minhas from the Dallas-Fort Worth area, joining us, a mental health expert. Thank you so much for your time and your service. And for those of you watching us, keep watching Muslim Network TV on muslimnetwork.tv, Galaxy 19, and other places. Assalamu alaikum.